All right, let's continue this quick discussion on some of the tools with brushes. And in fact, on this one, I'd like to explore one more thing. Let me restore that image. This is a fairly high resolution one, but the leaves are relatively small, but it's still usable for basic work and to identify some of the things we want to do when we create or recreate similar vines that are climbing up the walls. There's a brick wall here. And so we saw in the earlier tutorial that we can quite easily isolate a leaf and then paint with that even a whole series of leaves and create a nice set of leaves that are also getting dark with the drop shadow underneath it, such as in this area here. One of the challenges we have though is we also want to control perhaps the back and forth or the side-by-side alternations. Right? So for instance, as these leaves grow along this path of this twig, how do we make it so that, for instance, here we have one leaf around there, and then another one to the right side, and then back to the left side, and back to the right side. And that's one thing, and then also it gets smaller and smaller. Right? So there's a decrement along the edge or along the path. It gets smaller. Not always in a linear or consistent fashion. It might be just a very sudden drop towards the end. But you see in some cases like this one here that it definitely goes from a relatively wide size to a very narrow. So I want to control those two things, right? One is the alteration left and right, and the other one is the size as it goes. So let's first look at the alteration, and what we'll do is we'll just pick one of these leaves. And again, these are not very high resolution or high quality, and you might want to take some close-ups a little bit closer. But let's just take one of those bigger leaves here, like this one or this one. Let's take the lasso tool, which we can use to simply pick up, let's say this much around like this. And so we have a leaf there that maybe we can cut away a little bit, especially with the brush tool here. Right click on paint on alpha, maybe soft or hard. And if you paint with the left button, that's going to add to it. Paint with the right button, that's going to remove from it. Focus on the white dot or the white spot. That's what's actually adding or removing. And oop, that went too far, so we need to go in, but the brush is too big here, so I'm going to go and make it a little bit smaller. Change the size to something a little bit more manageable. There you go. Something like that. Okay, so we have that leaf. Let's go pick it up like before as a custom brush. Let's go store it. And so here, this is not exactly usable if we want to have an alternation left to right. All right, let's go back. Let me use the reset. There's currently still painting on alpha, so I want to go to the settings and FX, turn that FX on because off rather, because it was still in alpha mode. So now it's painting back on the RGB channels. Control D to clear the alpha channel. And so one of the problems is that as we paint this, it's not going left to right. But we could certainly create a second image of this. Perhaps this one could be rotated first. We could rotate it so that it's appearing perhaps this way, perhaps also a little bit bigger. And so now we have an image that's possibly going to be a better match for at least half of the growth going up, right? We need that to alternate left to right though. So one thing that you can do is perhaps first of all work on that step distance. Let's keep an eye on the settings, pin this one down. And so as we go here, we now see with the step distance a little bit bigger, we can see now that there is a nice progression of this. And the next thing is to rotate it to the other side. All right, so you might think, well, let's just rotate it. Let's create another copy of it here, store this, so we have this one, and rotate it the other way. All right, boom, something like this. And perhaps even a slightly different color, different hue. You can make it look a little bit different. You know, it doesn't have to be identical. And then essentially, as you paint it, this would be the counterpart. So now if you take this one and then add it to this simply by add frame here, right, or add it to a third one. Maybe we want to keep this one separate, this one by itself, and then we want to put a combination together. You could go to Brush Store and manage this copy, right? So you take this guy and you have it here already. Take this guy, click this, and then add it here. So now you can look at the film strip and there's 2 pages, 2 images, 2 frames in this animated brush. This is a minimalistic animated brush. An anim brush consists of at least 2 images. And as you're painting, it's now going left to right, alternating between the 2. Right? Now you might need to adjust the step a little bit more. Right? And now you're seeing a little bit of a challenge here because they are not cooperating too well. The step distance is okay, but there's something that's just not quite there. And the reason is that they are not centered around the same place. You see this frame here was more in the upper right quadrant. This frame here, that's this one here, is more in the lower left. So the alteration might be okay, but the image that we're seeing is not centered the same way. What we would need really is to have one image centered around this point and the other one around this point. Now what you could do is actually grab this as a custom brush. You can simply use the custom brush pickup tool or the selector tool and pick this up like this, and that way the 2 are kind of centered. You'd probably be better off really preparing this nicely though. So take one image, make it so that it will stamp down nicely. Let's go clear this thing here. Okay, stamp down one, take the other image, and make sure you preview so you can see where it's going to go. And maybe actually have them side by side exactly like this, or already add an offset. Right, so that's where you could do an interesting preparation of this. And then as you pick this up as a custom brush, you can simply keep it centered. Make sure that this is roughly going to be the center right here, and make your bounding box contain that in a nicely centered way. Right, now you have a brush that will nicely go back and forth, and of course you can adjust the scale a little bit, and they'll continue to be at a corresponding nice distance here. It's still not perfect, but it's getting there. And one more technique I would like to highlight is that if you do have the need to just do this one by itself, but you want it to be in preparation of using it together with this one, what you want is each of those be picked up, not centered by themselves, right? So you would take the custom brush pickup tool, you wouldn't pick it up like this, right? What you do instead, use the custom brush pickup tool and pick it up about like this, right? So the center is here. You need to put the bounding box around like that so that the center remains there. And then the next one you pick up over here, if you want this to be the center, make it so, right? Something like this. Now here I didn't have the alpha yet, so let me go and put this image back in. And what we'll do basically is pick up those leaves in the way that we really need them, and maybe we're lucky and we can actually find a leaf that has already the right rotation orientation there. This one, for instance, right? So I'm gonna go and grab this one. I'm going to go with the lasso tool first to select it. So something like this. There. And I'm going to say this here, this area here is where it needs to attach. In fact, I might even want to add a little stem here. All right, so let's use the Shift key as we select all of this together. Right, and at that point I can go and pick it up. So remember, we don't want to pick it up in a way that's centered. I mean, we could do this. If you do the custom brush selector, the pickup tool, it automatically finds the bounding box of your current selection and picks that up. That's not useful in this case. We need this to stay the center. So we need to make a selection that's roughly this big, right? And where this thing is on the left half of it. So what we'll do is we'll use the explicit custom brush selector, and it will use the alpha if there is one. So what you want to do is make sure that this point here will be in the center of your bounding box. Think about this much down you need to go about this much high as well. Think about this much to the left, you will need to go that much to the right. And ideally, I mean, one thing you could do is actually prepare it, like draw a box around it or something like that. Right? So you could put an extra layer here and say, and in this layer, let's go and erase to black, well, or to white actually. Let's go erase to white. That layer, what we'll do is we'll draw something simple. Let's see, where's simple brush, small simple brush. And what you could do is say, considering this shape here, we need something about from the lower left here. We need a rectangle tool here. Let's go grab the drawn rectangle tool, right? So we draw a box about this big. There. And but it's white on white, that's not very useful. It should be a little bit different. So let's see, we have default. Let's make that well, default is multiply. That should be okay as a layer mode. Multiply, and maybe it's my selection mask. So I'm going to store the selection here just for a second so I can clear it and get back to it in a second. So here's the leaf somewhere right there, right? And I'm going to go and draw a bounding box about this big, something like that. And the reason why I put this in a separate layer is that you can also then shift it around if you need it some more adjusted, right? I mean, if you go here now with the alpha that you stored, and you can restore it, replace it, you might see that perhaps you need to adjust the position of that rectangle to give you a better hint. So I would go with the filter, transform, and shift, and then that way you can shift the picture. Oh, but the alpha channel is blocking that. Yeah, so that's not going to be good if the alpha channel is on. We'll probably want to cancel that alpha channel for now, and perhaps instead of the alpha channel, use another layer to have a hint of where that leaf is exactly, where that selection exactly is. I mean, if it's approximate, you don't need to, but you could certainly put another layer there that gives you a rough idea of where that selection is. You would simply take the alpha channel into a separate layer, right? And one quick way to do that, by the way, is if you have the alpha channel here, let's say replace there, you have this, you want the image and the alpha. What you do is you go and make sure you select the image that you're looking at here, and then you simply store this image, right? When you do a store image, you actually get both the image RGB part of the image and the alpha channel with it. And then you could say, well, let's replace the alpha. Let's put that back. Well, that's there, just to prove that it's actually there. We can clear it and go back here and say replace alpha there. But more importantly, you can also take that alpha into another place. So you could do, for instance, you could say, let's go image, alpha, copy alpha to swap image. All right, so now the swap image is showing a copy of the alpha channel, which means you could also at that point transfer it, like switch the two, swap the two. There you go. So now you have this mask. You could put that into a separate layer, right? Add another layer here, and put this layer down if you need to have it that way. You can, where is it? There's the arrow to put it down. Put it down. There you go. You can get rid of the alpha channel now. You have the image of what used to be the alpha channel and that we saved away is now in a separate layer. You can make that layer be very dim. I mean, keep it in default mode if you want, or multiply mode, but make it something very dim. And then in this layer here, you put the image back that we want to see. So now we do have here a selection mask that can be used for dimming and revealing where your selection actually was, right? And you do see at the same time here, you can still see, perhaps you can make this a additive, subtractive, I mean, different ways to label this. And then so this image now you can use the shift tool, because we don't have a selection mask preventing any pixels from moving anymore. So we can go and transform that with the shift tool, and as you move it around, the entire box is shifted. And so this is interesting because then that way you can actually even put a central line, and where is the crosshair going to meet, and you can use that to really position your frame that you want to pick up. Right, so that's if you want to be picky about it. Now, once you're done, you hide this, you go back to the main layer, and actually you don't hide it. you show them, but you stay on this layer because that's where you want to pick things up from. Right, so and you can actually put the alpha back in place here, replace the alpha. So now you have a good idea of where things stand. This guy here is helping. We can actually get rid of this. We only need the bounding box or whatever markers we've put, if there's any cross line, center line, and that sort. But we are on the image with the leaf, and we're going to pick it up now with the custom brush. But we have now a visual reference that we can use to say what exactly we want to pick. Just be sure you don't pick the box itself. Well, the box is in a separate layer, so you won't pick it. You can safely be here and grab this. It's going to grab the RGB channels from the current layer, which is this one with the image, right? And then so when you store this as a brush, the only thing you have is that image of the leaf with a nice transparency mask all around it, and it is properly centered right there. See, the stem is centered, attached to the middle. Now, so that's one image, and then of course we could just turn the whole thing over. We could say, let's go image, flip horizontal, and we need the alpha. Do the same thing. Where is the alpha, flip, transform selection there, selection horizontal, and then we need to go find it. It's moved everything around somewhere. So let's go hide this. Let's hide the selection mask. Clear the selection. Where is our leaf? That's the question du jour. I guess we didn't flip it since we had the mask on, or maybe we were on the wrong layer. So let's make sure we're on the right one here, and with the selection mask, let's replace and find there it is, our trusted leaf. And what I want to do is simply give it the orientation in the other way. Now we can easily use actually this existing brush, right? Simply take this brush, no, this one, this is the one we wanted to work with. There you go. Take this brush, and so we know we can use that, and we can show it here as the current brush. Oops, why is it not actually painting? I'm on a single pixel brush here. There, this should paint. Oh, it's the size, I bet. There you go. Yeah, very small size. There you go. Okay, so here is the leaf that I already created. You can see where the hot spot is now. The cursor is tracking. As I'm moving the cursor, the leaf is moving with it, it's tracking with it, and it's near the end of the stem there, of the attachment branch. And so what I need to do is flip this brush the other way around. That's easy. We can go to the brush menu and simply flip it here. Horizontally will do. Right, horizontal. So now it's the other way around. You could also have rotated it. That's another way to do it. Rotate it by 80 degrees, or 180 rather. In fact, we might want to rotate it a little bit beyond here. So let's use this one. We have these two images. This one, we could go rotate it a tiny little bit, something like this. Perhaps give it a little bit more red, green, blue, or something, right? A little bit more yellowish tint. There you go, or a little bit more saturation, or less, and a little bit more brightness. So you can easily add a bit variation that way. And so you have this image, and you have this image. And all you need to do now is paint with those two together. So again, you take one, you store that, store and manage a copy of this, and then you take the second one and you add this frame. So now you have two frames as the film strip shows, but most importantly they are painting about the same center right there, just next to, if you look around here in this area, that's where it's where the hotspot of the center of the brush is. and they're both close to that. So now at this point, it's just a matter of changing the step, make it the right distance, and we have our first part done, right? Two parts in this tutorial. One is to make it possible to draw something like this. If you have this background and you want to draw a sort of something that climbs up there, and then on top of that you want that to also, let's go store this. Where is it? It's not this one, it's this one. Let's go put this one in our media here, our media collection, PS. We'll save this one, save media, and we'll call this leaves alternating, left, right. And what we really want to do with that is actually paint it so that it appears to be going up here, appears to be also casting a shadow. So again, we need to drop a shadow on that. These guys we can now close, can minimize. So this one, what we want to do is add a drop shadow. That's easy. We saw that earlier. We have a make drop shadow or add drop shadow, and you can make it a bit more fuzzy and a little bit more opaque, whatnot. And there you go. So now we have a drop shadow on both parts. So that's another step that we want to certainly work with. Let's go store this brush. And the next thing we want to do is to have it change size as we reach the top or the end of this. There's one more thing too, which is to have it turn. As we go around here, we want that to turn. So for that, we need to have it turn automatically. Use the direction of the pointer motion to determine the angle of the brush. All right, so as we go there, it turns around. It's not always perfect, right? Well, it's just like Mother Nature. It's a little bit messy at times. But if you go a quick dab like this, this will certainly help. We still need to do something about the stem in the middle, maybe have a smaller version of this going there as well. Right? Something like this here. But the question really is also, how do we change the size of this as we progress? All right, so how do we make it so that it's not always the same size from the top down, whatever, but it actually gradually gets smaller? Just like you see this one here, right? This is a good example. We want to achieve something like that. So as we do something like this, how do we make it go smaller towards the end? But that's something we can do with post-processing. Right, we do a drawing and then we have it fixed or corrected. There's a couple of other ways, by the way, but this is a really nice way. Look under the view menu. There's a tool called post correction. Right, post correction is to change the size of your brush as it evolves from the start to the end. Left side is the beginning of your brush stroke, your right side is the end of your brush stroke. And if you don't want it to go really too small, you don't let it go too small, right? You keep it somewhere around there. But it will go smaller, and what you can do is draw a brush stroke and then you see it. Oh, we need to enable it. One more thing right here, enable the post correction. All right, so let's do this again. Boom, now we have it change the size according to this graph. If we want to drop it really quickly and then come back up in size, let's see that. There it is. So there's lots of ways to use this for really funky things. There's also one thing you want is to, how is the size affecting the distance? Because when they are big, you see that they are more distant, and when they are small, they come closer together. That's because there is a relative size. You see an option here called relative. Now, that's not talking about grandma or mother-in-laws. This is relative in the sense of relative size. Size is relative to the distance, or distance is relative to step distance is relative to the size. Right? Make the step value relative to the size of the brush. So if you set the size smaller, you also want them to come a little bit closer. But on top of that, the post correction that does a resizing, and it can do a really funky thing. It can go up and down in many different things here. You see how it's changing size and then coming back and so on. So you can certainly do quite a number on this thing. Something like that. will look kind of, let's go down from the top. So you see it goes initial full size, go small, go big again, go small again, right? Big initially, and then you control how quickly that goes. You just add another control, just dragging and creating an extra control point, right? So now you have something really funky here. So all right, I think that sums it up. These are the two things I wanted to show you as the next step in creating some realistic looking leaves that you can grow on a wall like this. You know, you can go and just do something like this and have it change size, have it change, reset this if you need just a regular linear transition. That's a really quick way to do this. All right, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more. We'll see you on the next one.